I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even raise my voice. I just smiled, pushed my chair back, and walked out of my own engagement party while 43 people watched in silence. But before I left, I leaned down and said 4 words to my future mother in law. 4 words that, 2 weeks later, cost her everything she'd spent 15 years building. Let me take you back to the beginning because none of this makes sense without context. And trust me, by the time I'm done, you're going to need a minute to process it all. I grew up the kind of girl who learned early that love in my family had conditions. Not the obvious kind, not the I'll only love you if you get straight A's kind. The subtle kind. The kind that shows up at holidays and family dinners disguised as jokes. My mom had a way of making you feel small while laughing the whole time, so if you reacted, you were the one being dramatic. My older sister had always been the golden child. She married a doctor at 26. She lives in a house with a 3-car garage in Connecticut. She sends Christmas cards with a professionally taken photo of her family in coordinating outfits every single year. My mom keeps one framed on the mantle. There is no photo of me on the mantle. I'm a freelance UX designer. I work remotely. I move around a lot, and I've always been more interested in building a life that felt real to me than one that looked good from the outside. My mom never quite forgave me for that. Not in a dramatic, screaming fight kind of way. Just in the quiet, consistent way she'd ask about my little design projects at dinner, or the way she'd tilt her head and say, "Oh, you're still doing that. Interesting." I met my fiancé, I'll call him the man I almost married, at a work conference in Austin 3 years ago. He was charming and smart and laughed at the right things. His family was wealthy in that old money, understated way. His mother, the woman I'll call the architect of my worst evening, was the kind of woman who collected people. She liked having the right people around her, and for a while she decided I was one of them. When he proposed, I was genuinely happy. I know that might be hard to believe given where the story goes, but I was. I thought this was it. I thought I had finally built something my mom couldn't quietly diminish. I was wrong. The engagement party was held at a private event space in downtown Philadelphia. His family rented the whole floor. There was a florist, there was a caterer, there was a jazz trio. When I walked in with my fiancé that evening, I actually felt something I don't feel very often. I felt like the main character. Like this one was actually mine. My dress was not the dress I had picked out. I need to explain that because it matters more than it might seem. About 2 months before the party, my future mother-in-law offered to help me find a dress. She said she had connections to a boutique in the city and wanted to treat me. I thought it was a gesture of goodwill, so I agreed. We went together. I found something I loved, a deep emerald wrap dress, simple, elegant, me. She nodded and said, "That's beautiful. Let's make sure it fits perfectly before we commit." I took it as care. I left feeling like maybe we were going to be okay. 3 days before the party, she called and told me there had been a mix-up at the boutique and my dress wasn't available anymore. She was so sorry. But not to worry, she had a replacement she thought would be perfect for the occasion. She'd drop it off the next morning. What arrived was a cream-colored, corseted, extremely formal gown. Think mother of the bride meets antique shop. I'm 29. I wear vintage band tees and high-waisted jeans on a regular basis. This dress was not for me, but she called while I was still holding it, her voice bright and warm, telling me how she'd chosen it especially and how she knew I'd look radiant. And because I was 29 and still occasionally making the mistake of choosing peace over honesty, I said thank you and hung up. I wore the dress. I showed up to my own engagement party looking like a costume version of myself. The first hour was fine. Photographs, champagne, the kind of small talk that makes your face hurt from smiling. My mom arrived with my dad and my sister and her husband, and for a little while everyone was on their best behavior. My fiancé was attentive. I thought maybe I was overthinking the dress thing. Maybe it was just a miscommunication. Then the toast started. His mother went first. She stood up and said all the right things. How thrilled the family was, how much they admired me, how they were so looking forward to welcoming me. The room applauded. I smiled. And then she said, almost as an afterthought, almost too casual to be accidental, "We even found a beautiful dress for her tonight. Family tends to know best, doesn't it?" Light laughter. A few glances in my direction. I felt the color rise in my face, but I kept smiling. I told myself it was nothing. A clumsy compliment, not intentional. My mom stood up next. And if you've ever had a mother who knows exactly how to land a punch while making it look like a hug, you already know what happened next. She talked about how proud she was of me. She really did. But woven into every other sentence was a thread I recognized immediately, the thread of faint praise, of despite everything. She always did things her own way. She wasn't the easiest kid to raise. But look at her now. We always knew she'd find someone who'd be good for her. Not someone who was good. Someone who'd be good for her. Like I was a problem that had been solved. I looked at my fiancé during her toast. He was smiling, nodding, raising his glass. He did not look at me once. I made it through dessert. I made it through the after-dinner mingling, the playlist that switched to something louder, the moment when his cousin started doing shots at the bar, and the whole thing tilted from elegant to something messier. I made it through all of that. And then I went to get my jacket from the coat check, and I overheard a conversation I was never supposed to hear. It wasn't dramatic. That's the thing about the moments that actually change your life. They usually aren't. It was just two voices in a hallway. His mother and his aunt, not realizing I'd stepped around the corner. His mother said, "She signed the prenup, right?" And his aunt said, "I think so." He said she barely read it. And his mother said, "Good." Because the way he structured it, if they divorce within 5 years, she gets nothing from the property portfolio. It all stays in the trust. I stood in that hallway for exactly 4 seconds. I counted them. Then I went back into the party, set my champagne glass down on the nearest table, and picked up my bag. I found my fiancé near the bar. I touched his arm. He turned around, still smiling that easy smile. And I said, quietly, "I need to step out for some air. Will you walk me to the door?" He did. At the door, I stopped. I said I wasn't coming back in. He blinked. He said, "What?" I said I'd heard the conversation in the hallway. His face didn't go guilty. It went careful. That was the tell, not shock, careful. He started talking about how I'd misunderstood, how the prenup was just his family being cautious, how it was standard, how I was overreacting. And I stood there and I listened to all of it. And when he was done, I said, "I'm not angry right now. I'm just leaving." He grabbed my arm. Not hard, but he grabbed it. He said, "You can't leave your own engagement party." I gently removed his hand. Then I walked back into the room, not out, in, because I had left something unfinished. His mother was near the windows talking to one of the older guests. I walked over. She saw me coming and her smile went bright immediately, the way it always did. I leaned close, like I was going to say something warm, something private. I said, "I know about the amendment." That was it. 4 words, her smile didn't fall. But something behind her eyes shifted. And for just a moment, she looked at me like she was actually seeing me. Like maybe I wasn't the person she'd decided I was. I straightened up, smiled back at her, and walked out. I need to tell you what the amendment was, because I know you're wondering. About 6 weeks before the engagement party, I had been in my fiancé's home office looking for printer paper. He kept a messy desk, and I wasn't snooping. I genuinely needed paper. But when I pulled open the wrong drawer, I found a folder. And inside the folder was a copy of the prenuptial agreement with a handwritten amendment clipped to the back. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm a grown adult who can read. And what I read was this. There was a clause that, in the event of a divorce, any income I earned through independent contractor work during the marriage would be considered commingled with marital assets and therefore subject to a specific disbursement formula that, by my reading, essentially meant his family's trust would absorb a portion of whatever I built on my own. In plain English, if I built my freelance business into something real during our marriage and we later divorced, a chunk of what I had earned could end up in his family's hands. The amendment had been added after the original prenup I'd been shown. I'd signed the original version. I had not signed this. I didn't say anything to him that night. I took a photo of it on my phone. I closed the folder. I put it back. I spent the next 6 weeks thinking about what to do. I want to be honest about that because I don't want to sound like some kind of superhero who had it all figured out. I was confused and hurt, and I kept going back and forth. I loved him. Or I loved the version of him I thought existed. I wanted to believe there was an explanation. I almost asked him about it 3 separate times, and each time I talked myself out of it because I knew that if I asked, he would have a smooth, reasonable explanation that would make me feel like I was being irrational. So I quietly called a family law attorney. I did not tell my fiancé. I paid for the consultation out of my own account. The attorney confirmed what I suspected. The amendment was legally questionable, and at a minimum, I had not been presented with it before signing, which was a significant problem. She also pointed out that even if the amendment didn't hold up in court, the intent behind it was transparent and troubling. She asked if I wanted to move forward or give him a chance to explain. I told her I'd think about it. And then his mother planned an engagement party, gave me a dress that made me feel invisible, toasted me in a room full of people while reminding everyone I was a project that had been completed. And his aunt told his mother I'd barely read the prenup. So at the party, when I said I know about the amendment, I wasn't just making a vague threat. I was letting her know that whatever she thought she was managing, she hadn't managed me. The weeks after were not clean. I want to be clear about that too, because I've noticed that these stories sometimes skip over the hard part and jump to the triumph, and that's not honest. My fiancé called me constantly for the first 3 days. He went through every stage: apologetic, then defensive, then angry, then apologetic again. At one point, he showed up at my apartment. I opened the door, said I'm not ready to talk, and closed it. He stood in the hallway for about 15 minutes. Then he left. His mother called me once. Just once. She didn't apologize. She said she hoped I understood that families protect what they build, and she was sure I could appreciate that on some level. I said, I do appreciate that. That's exactly what I'm doing. Then I hung up. My own mother, when I told her what happened, was quiet for a long time. Then she said, well, you never made things easy, did you? I don't have a clean, satisfying answer to give you about my mom. I'm still working on that one. What I can tell you is that her response didn't surprise me, and it also didn't break me the way it might have 5 years ago. And I think that's progress, even if it doesn't look like it from the outside. My sister texted me 2 days later and said, I'm sorry, that was a lot. Just that. But it was more than I expected, and it meant something. The attorney I'd spoken with helped me formally notify his family that I had documentation of the amendment and was prepared to file a complaint with the state bar regarding the manner in which the prenup modification had been presented, or rather, not presented, to me. I wasn't looking to sue anyone. I was looking to be taken seriously. And I was. Within 2 weeks, his family's attorney reached out to mine. There were some quiet conversations I won't detail here because they're honestly not the point. The point is that I had not been powerless. I had just been treated like I was. Here is what I want to say to anyone who's been in a room where people were making decisions about your life around you, over you, for you, as if you weren't actually there. They count on you not reading the fine print, not just literally. They count on you being too overwhelmed, too polite, too in love, too afraid of being called dramatic to look closely at what's actually being handed to you. I almost didn't look. I'm glad I did. In the months after all of this, I moved to a new city, Portland, Oregon, which had been on my list for years, but always felt like something I'd do someday. I took on 3 new clients. I built out a part of my business I'd been putting off, and by the end of the year, it was generating more monthly revenue than I'd ever made at a staff job. I'm not saying this to brag. I'm saying it because the version of my life his family tried to legally position themselves to benefit from turned out to be real. It turned out to be worth something. And it's entirely mine. I don't think about him that often anymore. I think about his mother occasionally, not with anger, more with a kind of exhausted clarity. She taught me something I couldn't have learned any other way. That the people who underestimate you most confidently are usually the ones who need you to stay small the most. I found out recently, through someone we both knew, that the property trust his family had been so carefully protecting had run into some serious legal and financial trouble, something related to an undisclosed liability in one of the commercial holdings. I don't know all the details, and honestly, I didn't ask. It wasn't my business anymore. The night of the engagement party, when I walked out of that room in a dress that wasn't mine, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired and a little bit scared and very, very alone. But I also felt, for the first time in a long time, like I had finally stopped trying to fit myself into a picture someone else had framed. And if you're watching this and you're in something that feels like it's yours but keeps quietly telling you it isn't, that sick, low grade feeling you can't quite explain to anyone, please hear me when I say look closely at what you're actually being asked to sign. Not just the paper, all of it. Thanks for being here. I'll see you next time. I've thought a lot about what actually happened that night. Not the party, not the dress, not even the hallway conversation. I mean, what was really happening underneath all of it? The thing is, nobody in that room woke up that morning deciding to be a villain. My future mother in law genuinely believed she was protecting something worth protecting. My own mother genuinely believed her version of love was love. My fiance probably told himself the prenup amendment was just a formality, just smart planning, nothing personal. People almost never think of themselves as the person doing harm. They think of themselves as the person being reasonable. That's what made it so easy for them to underestimate me. Because when you've decided someone is manageable, you stop paying attention to what they're actually doing. You hand them a dress that isn't theirs and expect them to say thank you. You write an amendment into a legal document and assume they won't read it carefully, or read it at all. You make toasts at their party that are really about you, and you expect them to smile and not notice the difference. I noticed. I just didn't say anything right away. And I think that's the part I'm most at peace with now. Not the walking out, not the 4 words, but the 6 weeks in between when I sat with what I knew and decided to be careful instead of reactive. That took something. It took me overriding every instinct. I had to confront him immediately, to demand an explanation, to make my pain visible. I stayed quiet not because I was afraid, but because I understood that clarity is more powerful than noise. There's something I believe now that I didn't fully understand before all of this. The choices you make when no one is watching are the ones that actually shape your life. I could have asked him about the amendment that same night and let him talk me out of my own instincts. I could have worn that dress and swallowed the humiliation and told myself it didn't mean anything. I could have stayed at that party and laughed along with everyone else. Each of those choices would have been small. Each of them would have cost me something I couldn't have gotten back. Instead, I called an attorney. I kept the photo on my phone. I showed up to that party and watched how everyone behaved when they thought I didn't know. Those were choices I made alone, quietly, without anyone telling me I was right. That's the only kind of integrity that counts, the kind that doesn't need an audience. I'm not going to pretend the aftermath was easy or that I walked out of that engagement feeling like I'd won something. I felt loss, real loss. But I've come to understand that some losses are actually you finally putting down something that was never yours to carry. The relationship, the version of the future I'd imagined, the idea that being loved by that family meant I was worth loving, I had to let all of it go. What I built after was mine. Entirely, legally, undeniably mine. And the woman who thought I'd barely read the fine print? I think about her sometimes and I feel something close to gratitude. She pushed me toward the clearest version of myself I've ever been. That's not luck. That's what happens when you finally decide to pay attention.